What happens when a ship captain's choices steer a ship straight into catastrophe? Behind history's deadliest maritime disasters lie failures of leadership, poor decisions, and blatant negligence by arrogant captains. These commanders made decisions that transformed routine voyages into devastating tragedies. Their actions didn't just sink ships, they rewrote maritime history through incompetence and cowardice. In this video, we'll count down the 5 worst captains of all time, whose catastrophic failures at sea left a devastating trail of loss in their wake, and who will claim the top spot on our list. Welcome to Shipwreck History. A ship's captain holds one of the most consequential commands anyone can hold. At sea, their authority comes with one fundamental obligation: protecting the lives under their command. Every decision they make, from charting courses through dangerous waters to deciding when to change direction, carries the weight of human lives. In these critical moments, experience and leadership become the thin line between survival and disaster. A captain must remain at their post, ensuring passenger and crew safety before their own. It's why maritime law grants them absolute command of their vessel, because protecting human life demands nothing less. But when captains fail in these essential duties, when they abandon their responsibilities in moments of crisis, the cost is measured in lives lost and families shattered. And as we're about to see, these captains' failures prove so catastrophic, their negligence so profound, that they forever alter the meaning of maritime command. Let's get into the most jaw-dropping mistakes and outrageous lapses in judgment with our list for top 5 worst captains in maritime history. When the Greek luxury liner Oceanos departed East London, South Africa on August 3, 1991, it was already showing signs of serious neglect. The 39-year-old vessel had a history of maintenance issues, but Captain Yannis Avranis chose to sail despite warnings of an approaching storm, with 40-foot waves and wind speeds reaching 100 kilometers per hour. This decision would set in motion one of the most shameful displays of captain's cowardice in modern maritime history. As the Oceanos battled the fierce storm off South Africa's wild coast, water began flooding the engine room through a damaged waste disposal pipe. Rather than addressing the crisis, Captain Avranis failed to sound the alarm or make any emergency broadcast. The ship's entertainment crew, not the captain or his officers, discovered the flooding and began organizing the passenger evacuation. While water poured into the vessel and terrified passengers waited for direction, Avranis and most of his senior crew abandoned their post and fled the sinking ship, being among the first evacuees. The entertainment staff, led by the crew's director and the ship's guitarist, became the unlikely heroes. They radioed for help, coordinated with rescue services, and helped organize helicopter evacuations. All duties that should have fallen to the captain. While these brave performers worked to save lives, Avranis was already safely ashore, attempting to justify his desertion with the bewildering claim that he had left the ship to better coordinate rescue efforts from the air. Through the heroic efforts of the entertainment crew and South African rescue services, all 571 passengers and crew members were saved before the Oceanos rolled over and sank. The image of the ship's final plunge, with its stern rising vertically before disappearing beneath the waves, became an iconic symbol of both heroism and cowardice at sea. In the aftermath, Avranis' actions drew international condemnation. His infamous attempt to defend his actions revealed his profound failure to understand the fundamental duties of a ship's captain.
I order abandon the ship. Doesn't matter what time I leave. Abandon is for everybody. If some people like to stay, they can stay.
While legal proceedings were initiated in Greece, they ultimately stalled, and Avranis faced no criminal charges. While his reputation was severely damaged by the Oceanos disaster, accounts suggest he continued to work in the maritime industry afterward, though his role as a ship captain was significantly compromised. Maritime academies now use this incident in training, highlighting how the entertainment staff, not the captain, upheld the duty to protect passengers. Avranis' desertion represents one of the clearest failures of command responsibility in modern shipping history. But thanks to the quick thinking of the cruise staff and South African rescue services, the Oceanos became a rare case where a major maritime disaster resulted in no loss of life. Coming in at number 4 on our list is Captain Hugo Larsson of the passenger ferry Scandinavian Star, whose negligence and incompetence led to one of the deadliest maritime fires in European history. Captain Larsson was a 58-year-old Norwegian mariner who had spent most of his career on cargo ships rather than passenger vessels. Despite his limited experience with passenger safety, he was appointed captain of the Scandinavian Star just days before its fateful voyage in April 1990. The ship itself had just been hastily converted from a Caribbean cruise liner to a Scandinavian passenger ferry, operating between Oslo, Norway, and Frederikshavn, Denmark. What made this appointment particularly alarming was that neither Larsson nor most of his crew spoke the same language. The captain spoke Norwegian, while many crew members spoke only Portuguese. This communication barrier would prove catastrophic when crisis struck. Even more concerning, many crew members had never participated in a proper fire drill and were unfamiliar with basic safety protocols. On April 7, 1990, just 36 hours into Captain Larsson's command, catastrophe struck. Around 2 in the morning, as most of the 480 passengers slept, a fire broke out on Deck 3. The blaze, later determined to be arson, might have been contained had proper safety measures been in place. Instead, it quickly spread through the ship's corridors. As smoke filled the passageways, passengers awoke to chaos. The ship's fire doors, critical for containing the spread, had been improperly secured with rope or propped open with furniture. The sprinkler system, which could have suppressed the flames, wasn't operational. Meanwhile, the PA system remained silent, and no evacuation orders came from the bridge. Captain Larsson's response to the emergency was disastrously inadequate. Rather than immediately sounding the general alarm when the fire was reported, he waited approximately 20 critical minutes before activating it. During this delay, toxic smoke spread throughout the ship's ventilation system, turning corridors into deadly traps. Many passengers lost their lives while still in their cabins, or navigating the hallways, overcome by fumes while trying to escape. When Larsson finally ordered evacuation, the crew's lack of training became painfully apparent. Many abandoned their post, leaving passengers to fend for themselves. The language barriers meant crucial evacuation instructions couldn't be communicated effectively. Some crew members didn't even know how to lower the lifeboats properly. As the situation deteriorated, Captain Larsson made perhaps his most questionable decision. Rather than staying to coordinate rescue efforts, he and several officers were among the first to evacuate the burning vessel. He transferred to a nearby ship that had responded to the distress call, effectively abandoning hundreds of passengers still trapped on board the Scandinavian Star. The consequences were devastating. 159 people were lost, including 26 children. In the aftermath, criminal investigations focused on the arson rather than the captain's negligence. While Larsson was criticized for his handling of the disaster, he faced no criminal charges related to his failures as captain. Thankfully, he never captained another ship again. The Scandinavian Star disaster led to sweeping changes in maritime safety regulations. The International Maritime Organization strengthened fire safety requirements, mandated improved emergency training, and required common working languages on passenger vessels. But for 159 passengers of the Scandinavian Star, these changes didn't come in time, and they paid the price for a captain's unpreparedness and failure to fulfill the most basic duties of maritime command. At number 3 on our list is Captain Byron Voutinas, whose series of negligent decisions turned a routine cruise into a floating inferno that claimed 90 lives. Captain Voutinas commanded the Yarmouth Castle, a 38-year-old passenger liner operating between Miami and Nassau in the Bahamas. Built in 1927, the aging vessel had been grandfathered in under older and less stringent safety regulations. By the mid-1960s, the ship was showing its age, with outdated fire safety systems and wooden superstructure that would prove catastrophically flammable. On November 12, 1965, the Yarmouth Castle departed Miami with 376 passengers and 176 crew members. The voyage began normally, but unbeknownst to most aboard, the ship carried numerous safety deficiencies. Fire doors had been propped open for passenger convenience. Fire hoses were rotting and unusable, and the ship lacked an automatic fire alarm system. Worse yet, Captain Voyages allowed the storage of highly flammable mattresses in a locker next to the engine room, a flagrant violation of maritime safety practices. Around 1 a.m. on November 13th, as the ship sailed through dark waters, 60 miles northwest of Nassau, disaster struck. A fire ignited in that mattress storage locker. With no automatic alarms to alert the crew, the flames spread undetected for critical minutes, feeding on the wooden interior and old furniture. By the time a passenger discovered the fire, it had already engulfed multiple compartments. The open fire doors that should have contained the blaze instead allowed it to spread rapidly throughout the ship. As flames consumed the vessel, Captain Voyages' leadership collapsed completely. Rather than organizing evacuation efforts or sending distress calls, witness accounts describe him as frozen and indecisive. The radio operator sent out an SOS, but incredibly, Voyages never ordered the ship's whistle blown, the universal signal to abandon ship. This critical failure left passengers and crew without clear direction in the growing chaos.
It was so disorganized. Everything was disorganized. We never had a fire drill. We never had a warning that there was a fire.
What happened next sealed Voyages' place among the worst captains in history. As flames consumed the Yarmouth Castle and terrified passengers struggled to escape, Voyages disappeared from the bridge.
But our captain, God bless him, he was the first to leave the ship. And when I was on the deck, there he was. He and other crew members were in the lifeboat. And I have no idea where they thought they were going. But I know they were leaving that ship.
Passengers jumped from upper decks into the dark ocean to escape the flames. Many were trapped below decks, while others found themselves unable to launch lifeboats because no officers remained to direct the evacuation. When the flames finally subsided, 87 passengers and 3 crew members had been lost, many still in their cabins. The death toll might have been even higher without the heroic rescue efforts from the Bahama Star, captained by Carl Brown, whose crew launched boats and pulled passengers from the water. In the disaster's aftermath, investigations revealed the extent of Voyages' negligence. Beyond the immediate safety violations, investigators discovered the ship had been sailing with inoperable fire detection equipment and inadequate firefighting capabilities for months. Despite abandoning his ship and passengers, Voyages faced limited legal consequences. While the U.S. Coast Guard revoked his license, he avoided criminal charges due to jurisdictional complications. He never commanded another vessel after the disaster. The Yarmouth Castle disaster would bring about something positive, sweeping changes in maritime law. The catastrophe directly led to the creation of the Safety of Life at Sea Regulations of 1966, which mandated fire safety improvements, automatic sprinklers, and fire patrols on passenger vessels. But for the 90 victims who perished in the flaming wreckage of the Yarmouth Castle, Captain Voyages' failures had already cost the ultimate price.
I know what he didn't do, but I don't know why.
At number 2 on our list of worst ship captains in history is Francesco Schettino of the Costa Concordia. His vanity and cowardice led to one of the most infamous maritime disasters of the 21st century. Captain Schettino, nicknamed Captain Coward by the Italian press, commanded one of the largest Italian cruise ships ever built. The Costa Concordia was a floating luxury resort, 950 feet long, 13 decks high, with capacity for over 4,000 passengers. Schettino had worked for Costa Cruises since 2002, rising quickly through the ranks despite concerns from some colleagues about his judgment and attitude. On January 13, 2012, the Costa Concordia departed from Civitavecchia, Italy. What happened next exposed a captain consumed by ego and poor judgment. Schettino deliberately altered the ship's course to perform a salute, a dangerously close pass by the island of Giglio. This wasn't a navigation error, but a deliberate deviation from the approved route, reportedly to impress passengers, locals watching from shore, and most disturbingly, his unauthorized guest on the bridge, his mistress. At 9:45 p.m., as the massive vessel approached Giglio, Schettino took personal control of the ship. He ordered it within less than half a nautical mile from shore, so close that the ship's lookouts could clearly see rocks beneath the water. His mistress later testified that she was indeed on the bridge during this critical time, despite having no authorization to be there. Schettino was showing off for her when disaster struck. The ship's port side violently collided with an underwater rock formation, tearing a 160-foot gash in the hull. The impact was so severe that passengers reported hearing a loud bang and feeling the ship shudder. As seawater flooded the engine rooms, power failed throughout the vessel. The massive ship began listing to its starboard side as it drifted back toward Giglio's shoreline. What followed revealed the captain's true character. Despite the obvious severity of the damage, Schettino delayed issuing evacuation orders for over an hour. He downplayed the emergency in his communications with maritime authorities, stating it was only a blackout. This critical delay cost lives, as the growing list made evacuation increasingly difficult. When Schettino finally ordered evacuation around 10:50 p.m., the ship was already listing 20 degrees. Passengers described scenes of chaos, crew members giving contradictory instructions, lifeboats that were impossible to launch from one side, and a captain notably absent from coordinating rescue efforts. But Schettino's most egregious actions were still yet to come. While hundreds of passengers still fought for survival aboard the sinking vessel, he did something almost unthinkable for a ship's captain. Witnesses reported seeing him change into civilian clothes. Then, around 11:30 p.m., with more than 300 passengers still aboard, Schettino abandoned ship, claiming that he fell into a lifeboat. The captain's desertion became even more inexcusable when Coast Guard Commander Gregorio De Falco contacted him by phone. A recorded conversation between them would become infamous worldwide.
Donne o persone bisognose di assistenza, e mi ne dice il numero di ciascuna di queste categorie. È chiaro? Guardi, Schettino, che lei si è salvato forse dal mare, ma io la porto veramente molto male. Faccio passare l'anima dei guai. Vada a bordo. Sto qua per coordinare i soccorsi. Che sta coordinando lì? Vada a bordo, mi coordini i soccorsi da bordo. Lei si rifiuta? No, non mi sto rifiutando. Lei mi sta rifiutando di andare a bordo, comandante? No, sto andando. E mi dica qual è il motivo per cui non ci va. Ci sto andando perché ci sta l'altra lancia che si è fermata. Lei vada a bordo, è un ordine. Lei non deve fare altre valutazioni. Lei ha dichiarato l'abbandono nave. Adesso comando io. Lei vada a bordo. È chiaro? Sto andando a bordo. Vada. Ci sono già dei cadaveri, Schettino. Avanti. Quanti cadaveri ci sono? Non lo so. Uno l'ho sentito. Me lo devi dire lei quanti ce ne sono, Cristo. Ma ti rende conto che è buio e che qua non vediamo nulla? E che vuole tornare a casa, Schettino? È buio, vuole tornare a casa? Salga sulla prua della nave tramite la biscacina e mi dica cosa si può fare, quante persone ci sono e che bisogno hanno. Ora!
With the captain gone, passengers still trapped aboard faced increasing danger. Some jumped into the frigid January waters. Others clung to the exposed side of the ship. Through the night, rescue workers battled to save those still aboard as the vessel continued to sink. By morning, 32 people had lost their lives. Losses that investigators later determined were largely preventable had proper evacuation protocols been followed. The legal consequences for Schettino were appropriately severe. In 2015, he was convicted of manslaughter, causing a maritime disaster, and abandoning his passengers. The court sentenced him to 16 years in prison, which he began serving in 2017 after exhausting his appeals. The Costa Concordia disaster resulted in a staggering $1 billion salvage operation, an astronomical price paid for one captain's vanity, negligence, and cowardice. Schettino's name has become synonymous with failed leadership, a captain who literally and figuratively abandoned his responsibilities when they mattered most. Taking the top spot on our list at number 1 is Lee Jun-suk, captain of the MV Sewol, whose catastrophic leadership failures led to South Korea's worst peacetime disaster in decades. His actions eclipse even the egregious negligence of Captain Schettino, earning him the disgraceful title of history's worst maritime captain. Captain Lee, who was 69 years old at the time, had decades of maritime experience, but had only recently begun piloting the Incheon to Jeju Island route. The MV Sewol began its service in 1994 in Japan, where it operated safely for 18 years as a passenger and vehicle transport vessel. In 2012, the aging ferry was sold and brought to South Korea, where it was extensively renovated. The new owner immediately made significant alterations to maximize profitability, setting the stage for future disaster. It was modified to carry more passengers and cargo, modifications that dangerously compromised the vessel's stability. The ship was routinely overloaded, operating with insufficient ballast water, issues known to the operator, but ignored for profit. Safety inspections had been falsified, with the vessel's irregular maintenance history revealing that it frequently sailed despite known stability problems and improperly secured cargo. On April 16, 2014, the Sewol departed Incheon, carrying 476 people, including 325 students from Danwon High School on a field trip. The ship was severely overloaded, carrying more than double its cargo capacity, with much of its ballast water removed, leaving it dangerously unstable. Around 8:48 a.m., as the Sewol navigated a treacherous channel, an inexperienced third mate ordered a sharp turn despite warnings about strong currents. Captain Lee was not on the bridge during this critical maneuver, having retired to his quarters, his first catastrophic failure of leadership. The overloaded vessel began listing severely. Cargo shifted violently, accelerating the tilt. As the situation deteriorated, Captain Lee made the fatal decision to instruct passengers, primarily teenagers, to stay in their cabins and wait. The ship's intercom repeatedly broadcast, "Do not move from your places. Don't move." This command, which hundreds of students obediently followed, would seal their fate. While precious minutes for evacuation slipped away, Captain Lee and his crew prepared their own escape. Maritime footage captured Lee being among the first to abandon ship, stepping into a rescue boat, while hundreds remained trapped inside. The communication failures extended beyond the ship. As news reached parents, officials provided false information, initially telling frantic families that all students had been rescued, only to discover hours later that they remained trapped inside the capsizing ferry. Those students who disobeyed orders and fled their cabins had a chance of survival. Those who followed the captain's instructions found themselves in rooms rapidly filling with seawater. The vessel's complete capsize took nearly 2 hours, ample time for an organized evacuation. Instead, 300 people were lost, including 250 high school students. The slow-motion nature of the disaster makes it unforgivable. There was time to save nearly everyone, had Captain Lee shown even minimal competence. Subsequent investigations revealed there was corruption extending beyond the captain. Government regulators had overlooked safety violations for bribes, and this corruption ultimately contributed to President Park's impeachment in 2016. For his part, Captain Lee was sentenced to life imprisonment for willful negligence. In court, he claimed he issued evacuation orders, though he was contradicted by the ship's own recordings. 15 crew members received sentences ranging from 5 to 36 years. Captain Lee abandoned hundreds of school students to a slow, terrifying fate while securing his own escape. The victims' youth, the extended time frame when rescue remained possible, Captain Lee's early and unapologetic escape, and the systematic corruption in South Korea all make the Sewol tragedy uniquely horrendous, and why Lee Jun-suk earned the number 1 spot on our list. We hope to never see another ship captain like him again. The 5 captains on our list represent the worst of maritime leadership, men who abandoned their duty and chose self-preservation when lives depended on them. Their failures weren't accidents, but profound breaches of trust that sent hundreds to preventable deaths. Each disaster shares haunting parallels: captains who fled while passengers remained in danger, evacuation orders never given, and vulnerable people left to face catastrophe alone. The ocean remains unforgiving of leadership failures, and their failures teach us that maritime leadership isn't just about navigation or technical skill, but about the courage to put others before oneself when facing the darkest moments at sea. Do you agree with our choices? Let us know in the comments who you would choose for worst captains in history. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share. It goes a long way in helping us grow our channel. Don't forget to subscribe for all things shipwrecks. And until next time, keep exploring.